Welcome back. Okay, questions. Y'all, I really like to say, but I also like every day. But every time I read it, I'm like, it's so good. Like, it's so wise. And so I hope that you learned something. Um, so let's get started. Obviously, the beginning was talking about divorce. And so the Pharisees are questioning him, right? What does their questioning reveal about their motives? Right? Them coming up and questioning Jesus, testing him, right? Saying, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? And they come back and say, well, then why did Moses command that you could send her away? So what does this reveal about their motives? Which I would just say, if you want to start to become a good conversationalist, learn from this too, how people reveal their motives in the questions that they ask, right? Someone's talking to you, be like, why are you asking this question? Or like, what does this say about where you're at and your way of thinking and your heart to even ask this question? And understanding, like, we need to understand that the way we think and our heart are tied to each other. It's a part of our psyche. So if you look at someone and you see them acting a certain way, again, unless it's pretentious, but when it's genuine acting, that choice is coming from some kind of feeling that they have, right? So it's like, what do they feel about this situation? And any feelings that we have are tied to our mindset, are tied to the way that we think about that situation or what we believe is true. So, what do they believe is true? But again, it's like we kind of know what they believe is true, but it's also what they want to believe is true. And so, just why is this the way they want it to be? What does it reveal about their heart? Um, okay, and then we talked about Jesus bringing up the Genesis account in marriage. And so, just rehash that, right? What is he teaching us about marriage by referencing all the way back to Jesus, far before Moses? I mean, not Jesus, all the way back to the garden. Jesus is referencing all the way back to the garden, Adam and Eve, creation, before Moses. So, what's he showing us about marriage? Um, and then the disciples, which I didn't really talk about this much, but it's really funny. Their reaction. So they're like, well, if this is the situation between husband and wife, then it's better not to marry. If I can't get out, it's just better not to get in. That's what they're saying. Oh, it's so sad. And it's like, you're here, right? Like, I think about a parent, your mother birthed you, and her thought could have said, she could have said, dang, if I'd have known there was no way out of this, it'd been better not to do it, right? But it's like literally the reason we have purpose in life and we're here and all the things we do come from us taking responsibility and accountability and us not running from the things we commit to, right? Commitment. And so anyway, they're just saying, dang, if there's no way out. And so what does this reveal about their understanding of marriage, right? Just still, again, they're not the Pharisees, but still the way that we think about marriage. And we're like, gosh, well, if it's going to cost me, I don't really know. And it's like we do other things that cost us, but for some reason with this, it's like, oh, that's going to cost. And just this, again, the selfishness, the mindset, but how it shows our understanding of it is like, well, if it's not going to be fun, then I don't know. So yeah, how are they still missing it? And go back and watch what I said. If you didn't watch it, watch everything that I said because I really go into it and hash it out. But we're missing it. How are we missing it? And that's kind of goes into this question of, um, well, I guess it's going to kind of tap into all of them. So I'll get back to that one because that's to do with culture. Um, and then we talked about those that stay unmarried. And if you want, read it in First Corinthians. Do I have which chapter that actually is? No, I don't. I can find it. I'm sure I can find it. Oh, 1 Corinthians 7, where he talks about unmarried life, but and talking about the kingdom of heaven, right? Like how you can serve the kingdom of heaven. Um, I mean, I wouldn't spend too much time on this because we'll get there when we read 1 Corinthians 7, but just thinking about the perspective of singleness, whether it's you or others, and just this weight that we put on marriage. I would even say, ask yourself, are you prioritizing marriage over God? If you had to pick one, it's just a good test. It will get your heart right real quick. Because, like I said, I fasted and I remember praying for a relationship to work. And I heard the Lord say, but if you had to pick one, and I was like, well, I've never had to pick one. Like in my mind, it was always both. And he's like, I know, but if you had to pick one, because if it's for you, then when you pick me, you'll also get the relationship. So you don't have to worry about that. But if you pick me and you lose the relationship, then knowing that that relationship wasn't right for you, but you know you picked what was stable and true and steadfast. And of course, I was like, I'm never picking anything over you. The last thing I already know what that relationship was like when you weren't in the middle of it. And I'm not going back. I don't want him bad enough that I will have a relationship with him without you that is going to completely destroy my life and my soul and just drag me through the mud for the rest of my life. Like, no, I'm not going into a relationship with him without you. But I'm hoping you'll get into that relationship. And I think he's like, I can't. He won't let me in, so it's not going to happen. So just come to me and we'll let it go. But anyway, just and I'll probably do we'll figure it out. Maybe it's when I get to that chapter, I'll talk more about singleness because that is an important topic. Um, but how we did talk at the end about just like there is purpose and like how dare you shame people that either can't because of physical disabilities, like can't reproduce, can't get married, whatever's happening, or have chosen it to think that there's not the same amount of purpose. But like I said, just checking your heart and are you putting marriage or are you putting a relationship with a human above God? If you have to pick one. And then your mindset about marriage. Are you thinking about yourself and what you're going to get out of it? Or are you willing to pay the price that it costs you? Just like, this is why it's so funny. And this is where it shows the immaturity. If you won't even give God what it costs to be with him, what makes you think you're going to give what it costs to be with a human? As soon as they frustrate you or you're not attracted to them, you're going to come back to yourself. You're going to be like, well, you're not doing what I want. You're not making it easy. I'm not enjoying this. And then it comes back to you. So this is why our relationship with the Lord, learning to sacrifice of whatever it costs. It costs us the world to be with him. Okay, cool. Paying that price, then we can replicate it for a human. And when there's cost associated with the marriage, we endure. We don't quit. You don't have a quitter mindset. So just think about that. Do you have a quitter mindset already? Do you think of divorce as an option, as a way to get out? Are you justifying that, right? Like, are you, have you misused this verse before? And hopefully this can change your heart. Um, like I said, and just do you look at marriage? Do you look at relationships and think about what you're getting out of it or what you're going to give? And be okay if the rest of your life in that relationship is always about what you're giving rather than thinking about what you're getting out of it. Are you okay? Would you enter a relationship if you knew that actually for the rest of your life, maybe the amount you give wasn't going to be reciprocated? But it's not about what you're getting, it's about what you're giving. So are you okay if you pour your heart out and you love someone and you are giving, 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 and it's not about what you get out of it? Okay. So this is interesting with the children. Why do you think the disciples tried to stop the children? I've never thought about that. And maybe it's for the sake of this conversation, to show again who they are and how they are. And even their disrespect, maybe it's in society. It's not just to women, it's to children. It's like, okay, little kid, like, get out of here. Like the grown-ups are talking. Like Jesus is only for us. Jesus is only for those that are truly suffering. And you're just you're a little rascal. Right? Maybe it's like that they didn't respect children. And so Jesus is even showing that, like how he respects children. But so what does his response reveal about his heart for children? And I like this, those that are dependent or vulnerable. Now we're all dependent on him, but even just in a vulnerable state, it's kind of showing that it's innocent, it's vulnerable, it's dependent, but what it reveals about his heart for children and how he's even saying like they get the kingdom. Like we should be like that. We should be innocent. We should be vulnerable. I've said this before as far as my relationship with the Lord and me growing in intimacy with him and realizing I had trust issues and I had a really weird relationship with intimacy because of the world, right? A promiscuous relationship with intimacy. But feeling like I got my innocence back. Like I feel innocent again, which is so cool. I just feel like pure. Um, but anyway, so his relationship with children and our relationship with, how to be like children and what we think that means. Why they are the ones that inherit the kingdom. Because we're about to realize a person that the Lord says can't inherit the kingdom, or not not can't is hard. Hard to I just did a little rap, a little skitty scat. Um, that it's hard for them to enter, versus he says with children, it's theirs. Right? So why is it theirs? Why do we think that a child is resembling the right kind of heart posture, the right kind of mindset and belief system, right? And trust and all those things. Um, okay. So then the rich man, what does his even like questioning with Jesus, right? This conversation reveal about his understanding of eternal life. Because even when he says, what good thing must I do? It just shows that the religious leaders are really getting to the people. What good thing must I do? And he's like, well, then what do I lack? Right? He's like, well, I've done that. I do that. I don't do that. So what do I lack? It's a me, is right. It's the self-effort mindset, which is just a great section to point out how the Lord is not about that. Um, and so then Jesus challenges his views on goodness, right? We need to point that out. Jesus isn't actually saying him fulfilling certain laws is what makes him good, but Jesus is meeting him where he's at, right? He's like, well, let's go through some of them. Here's a list of the things. And like, have you done these things? Right? So like this man in his own mind is defining what he thinks is good. And Jesus is saying, well, let's go through the list. Like, are you good in your own mind? Right? Do you think you're good? And the guy's like, yeah, I think I'm pretty good. And the Jesus is like, well, what about this? And then the man's like, this is, he walks away sad. He's like, oh, dang, right? Mic drop. You raised the bar. So why do you think Jesus, right? He goes through this list of, well, do you do this? Do you do that? Like all the laws. Why do you think he asks or tells the man to sell his possessions and not just sell them, give them to the poor, right? You've got all this stuff you don't even need. Get rid of it. Get rid of it and give it to the poor, right? So this is teaching us what the Lord means, what's getting in our way of our relationship with God, right? So with the divorce part, it's like what's getting in our way and the mindset there. With the childlike faith, it's like what's getting in the way and our mindset there. And then lastly, with this, what's getting in the way. And so what does it reveal about the man's heart, right? Why do you think he said no? That's crazy. He couldn't do it. It was right in front of him. And again, showing that the Lord invites us. Because right, he talks about it's hard for this guy to get in, but he says it's possible with God, even if it's impossible for man. But why do you think the man didn't give it up? And can you relate? You probably have such a smaller amount too. I mean, actually, I don't know. There might be some people out here that are, um, you know, born into money or something. But other than that, the rest of us, it's like we can't even give up our luxury item versus let alone the luxury lifestyle. But what does it reveal about the man's heart, and why do we think he couldn't give that stuff up? Um, and how does this illustrate the challenge of wealth in following Jesus? And this is what I said about the parable of the seed. Go back to the parable of the sower, the third seed, look it up, and how he talks about they get choked out by the pleasures and the wealth of the world, the deceitfulness of wealth. How does this show that wealth makes it challenging to follow Jesus. Now, the point is that when you really break through, and like I said, this was a huge thing for me because I was a corporate climber. I'm in the wealth world, right? Like that's like I've been blessed. And to realize, whoa, abundance is actually on the other side of it. That the third seed gets choked out because it doesn't want to give up what it has and doesn't realize all the fruit is actually on the other side. Like the true abundance, the fruitfulness and the multiplication is on the other side. But go back and look at that seed and like the deceitfulness of wealth, how wealth stops us from becoming the fourth seed that has 30, 60, 100 fold, right? There's more on the other side, but somehow wealth is a block. It's like we can't cut through it, and there's actually more. God is a God of wealth, right? Wealth in the sense of treasure, it's abundance, it's like provision. He is the God that provides all of the fruit. But if we've collected any fruit on our own, right, rather than bearing it, becoming the tree that's bearing the fruit, somehow with wealth, it's like we've collected some fruit, we have some baskets, and we think, I've got to hold on to these baskets. What if I never get fruit again? And the Lord's like, when you bear fruit, you will never have to question if you're going to have fruit again. You'll always have fruit versus, and this is again a metaphor, but I hope it clicks for someone. It's not about you collecting and storing your baskets of fruit. It's about you bearing fruit, and you will bear it every year, year after year after year. We have proof all around us. But so anyway, how wealth chokes us out. And then let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's the whole camel through the eye of a needle thing, but it just goes back to um, why it's hard. Why is it so hard for us to give up possessions? Um, and then it says the disciples responding, right, to his teaching about wealth and salvation. So when they say, well, then who can be saved? And right. And I think about how Jesus is like, I came to heal the sick and save the lost, right? But it's like, I don't know why they would think that richness has anything to do with salvation. And this is just where it shows everything's upside down and backwards. They think the people with the most power, the people with the most success are the blessed ones, are the ones that are more loved by God, are more saved. And that's why when Jesus at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount is like, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. Like, don't you dare. And Jesus came in a manger. He's like, I'm not saying that God loves the rich more. That is not, they are not more favored at all. Grace is favor. The Lord reaching down and extending, and he reaches the lowly. He's like, I have grace and favor for every single human. Don't you dare think possessions are what make you better. But what does it teach us about God's power to save? And I just love the irony because we keep thinking, oh, God's going to save the sinners. It's like, actually, God's going to save the rich. Like, we look and we think, oh, all those homeless people on the street, like all those drug addicts, like they really need Jesus. No, the mansions need Jesus. The people that think they're secure and providing for themselves and self-sufficient and sustained and don't realize their dependence on God, they are the ones that need to realize anything's possible with the Lord. That's what he says, though. I will show them that anything's possible. But anyway, God's power to save. And then Jesus has promised, right? He says, to those that leave everything to follow him. And how does it challenge our priorities? Because again, this is the thing where he's saying, you're not going to see it on this side of heaven. You see it on the other side. And this is what faith is. But how Jesus is saying, when it's a promise, when you drop everything to follow me and you lay down your life and you stop making it about you and your status and what you can possess, and you, just like we've said in marriage, it's the same kind of thing. It's like you take the cost, you stop self-preserving, and you don't need your life to look a certain way or be about you. And you say, like, I give you my life, right? I lose my life. I lose myself for your sake. He's like, this is the promise, right? On the other side. And it's the 100 times as much as you've given. I will give 100 times more of what you've given. But so how does it challenge your priorities? Right? What steps can you take to prioritize eternal treasures over earthly possessions? Because we even have the word treasure wrong. That's why I love that it's possessions, because it's like this stuff literally withers and fades and burns. And we learn that in disasters. It gets swept away. And him saying there is spiritual seed. Everything around us is manifest from a spiritual seed first. How can you invest in the spiritual world knowing that it is eternal? So literally, what steps can you take? Don't just read this and go, yeah, that sounds nice. No, this is us, right? This is us. How do you take steps to prioritize eternal treasures over earthly? Um, and then all of this, how do these teachings, um, like it's teaching us about marriage, children, and wealth. So how does that challenge our cultural norms today? I love that. I hadn't even realized that those are three things, right? Like cultural norms: marriage, children or family, and wealth. So our perspective about how we're going to die to ourself, right? How check yourself and how you see relationships, and what do you need to do to die to yourself, and have that constantly written on your heart that your relationships are not about you and what you get out of them, but they're about what you give, and what we've learned in that today. That you are going to have a mindset of dying to yourself, getting out of the way, and just giving, and knowing that you receive everything you need from the Lord. And then with children, right? How do you have childlike faith? But also, how do you love and respect and admire children and learn from them and see them and let them actually be an example in your life and bring out that youthfulness and that trust, right? Just to learn from children and not discredit them like they don't know anything or know enough. It's like they actually are in it. They are in what we left behind. And then we left it behind and we found ourselves in despair. And so us being able to look back and have the hope and see in them the hope we used to have. And then with wealth and just the difference, we've already talked about it a little bit, but just the cultural difference between what the world tells you is important. And that's what the enemy knows. That's like a test. Is the enemy knows that if he can get you to the third stage of the seed, you're the most deceived, because you're like, well, I wasn't the first or second seed, right? I At least I did plant roots, and they weren't just shallow roots, they're deep roots, and you miss out that you never get to be the fourth seed. Like, you've grown enough that you think, well, it's not like it was all for nothing. I've grown enough, but I've reached a point where I'm comfortable now. And so that's the worst lie of the world. I feel like if the world was just the first seed, we'd all get over it really quick, because we'd realize we had no root system and we'd stop investing in that. We'd be like, that's not really taking off. The worst is that, and even the second one where it's like, oh, everything springs up, but then it has no roots. And so the worst place to be is the third, because you're almost there. You're far enough away from nothing that it's like you think you've invested and it's paid off, but you haven't actually got the full payoff. And so anyway, just all of that, how culture versus what the Bible's saying in marriage, children and wealth. Um, and then let's see. I mean, I guess I just said it though, but like how to have childlike faith. And then at the very end, he says, um, first will be last and last will be first. So just chew on that. Maybe even look up commentary, look it up in the Greek. Like, what does that mean? And like I said, I'll go in a lot more on other chapters about pride and humility when that is the topic. Um, but willing to be last here, to be first there. And not first in like competition, not first in like better than. Um, Again, it's like the wedding banquet parable where it says the person that comes to the wedding and just takes the seat next to the groom, and the groom's like, actually, that seat's saved for someone, but like, can you scoot down? That's humiliation, right? You come in pride and you get humbled, versus the person that comes in and like sits far away, and then the groom's like, what are you doing? Come sit next to me, or come sit closer. So now you've come in humble and you've been exalted. And so anyway, just the difference between that. Are you willing to be humble on this earth and see the exaltation that comes from others? Or are you going to self-exalt? You are going to exalt yourself and then get humiliated and humbled by others. So anyway, love you. That's it for today. We're just going to keep going. We're making it through Matthew. I hope that you're enjoying it. Like I said, I'd love to hear your answers to these questions, or what your favorite verses are, or just anything that you need from me. I'm here, and I hope you have a good day. Okay, bye.